Okay, gang, so now that we have mastered factoring, we're going to go on and look at quadratic equations. It's important to recognize a quadratic equation because there's a certain strategy to solving them, just like there was a certain strategy to solving linear equations. So a quadratic equation always has a distinct form. It has a quadratic term, it has a linear term, and it has a constant term. You'll notice the quadratic term has an x squared, the linear term has just an x, and the constant is just a number, and it has to equal something. So quadratic equations that have no linear term are special. If they have no linear term, they can be reduced to ax squared equals c. Can be reduced to the quadratic term equaling a constant. And then, once that happens, you can solve it just like you would a linear equation by isolating the variable. To get the variable by itself, the last step involves taking the square root of a number. Because to get it by itself, you have to do the opposite operations. And the opposite of squaring is square root. The square root of a number results in two solutions, which we will talk about as we go through some examples together. So let's take a look at some examples of quadratic equations. 2x squared minus 50 equals 0. No linear term, so we can isolate the variable. We want to take our minus 50 over here. So instead of minus 50, it becomes plus 50, and 0 plus 50 would still be 50. And then I want to get rid of my 2. So the opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2. So 25 divided by 2, 50 divided by 2 is 25. Gave you the answer. Oops. Now we're down to the part where we have to take the square root. If you look at that equation, it's saying some number to the exponent 2 equals 25. There are two numbers that you can put to the exponent 2 to get 25. 5 to the exponent 2 equals 25, and negative 5 to the exponent 2 equals 25. Therefore, we have to have a positive and a negative answer whenever we square root. So x will equal positive or negative, whatever the square root of 25 is, which in this case is 5. So we really have two answers. We don't like to write more than we have to, so we'll leave it written like this. You could write it out if it makes more sense to you as 5 or negative 5, to understand that there are two answers. Okay, let's look at the second one. Same idea, no linear term. So we're going to put our like terms together, and we're going to isolate the variable, starting with adding and subtracting. Instead of subtracting 4, I'm going to add 4. 41 plus 4 would be 45. Instead of multiplying by 5, I'm going to divide by 5. Give me 9. And instead of squaring, I'm going to take the square root, and I'm going to remember that I always have a plus and a minus, because positive 3 squared would be 9, and negative 3 squared would be 9. So plus or minus 3. And if we continue on with the same logic, no matter what it looks like, there's no linear term, no x, we keep putting our like terms together. Watching your sign, you always look in front of the number for the sign. So that means that's positive 19. The opposite of positive or add 19 would be minus 19. So 4 minus 19 would be negative 15. And I keep doing my opposite operation. Instead of multiplying by negative 3, I divide by negative 3. I'm changing from multiplying to dividing. I'm not changing whether it's a positive or negative number. So I divide by negative 3. So negative divided by negative is a positive. And last step, opposite of squaring is square root. And remember our plus minus. So we want the square root of 5. And I believe up here somewhere I said round to 2 decimal places. And you're going to need your calculator out. And we'll see what the square root of 5 is. To 2 decimal places. So we've got approximately plus or minus 2.24, a little more than 2. Number 4, same process. Instead of adding 12, I'm going to subtract 12. So 3 take away 12 would be negative 9. Opposite of squaring something, don't forget your plus minus, is the square root of negative 9. But here we have a problem. Square root is asking us, what do you square to get that number? If I try to take the square root of a negative number, well, I know 3 squared equals 9 because 3 times 3 equals 9. But how do I get a negative number? To get a negative number, you would have to have a negative times a positive. And when you square something, you have to multiply the exact same number. So you will never have 2 different signs when you're square rooting. So the square root of a negative number is not possible. There is no answer, no solution for that question. So we did 2 basic ones, and then we talked about watching the signs in number 3. And we talked about what happens when you square root a negative number, that there's no answer. Let's look at a little more complicated equations, ones that have brackets in. So if we've got brackets in them, there's a couple of ways to approach them. No, I lied. There's not really a couple. The best way to approach is to remove the brackets by multiplying. So in 5, I'm going to multiply everything in the bracket by 4. And 15 times 4 is 20, carry the 2, 60. And these ones are more complicated. There's still no linear term, no x term, but there's more than one x squared and there's more than one number. So I want to put the like terms together. It's easiest to put 60 over here because it will change from subtracting to adding, so I don't have negative signs to deal with. And my 2x, the opposite of 2x would be minus 2x. So I have 86 equals 2x squared, divide by 2, 43 equals x squared, and the opposite of squaring, square root, remembering your plus and minus. So 43 square root is about 6.56. Last one. Brackets. Binomials in brackets means we're going to do FOIL, first outside, inside, last. So I'm going to have x squared plus 6x plus 4x plus 24. And I'm going to have 2x squared, 4x plus 6x plus 12. I'm going to collect my like terms, make it look all nice and pretty. Now, this one has an x term. Well, let's keep collecting our like terms and see what happens. Put them together. So if I put my x squareds together, I'm going to have 2x squared minus x squared. If I put my other numbers together, when I bring 10x over and do the opposite, instead of plus 10x, it'll be minus 10x. Oh, and there go our x terms. And when I bring the 12 over, it'll be minus 12. So 10 take away 10 will be 0. So now we're back to looking like the rest of them. No x term. So we've got 12 equals x squared. And we're looking for the square root of 12, which is about 3.46. So there you have it. It's all about rearranging your equation, doing the opposite operations, square rooting, and most important is remember when you square root, you get 2 answers, plus or minus. Make sure you understand why you get 2 answers. That would be an excellent test question. All right, there you guys go. You have questions in the do-a-tangs on page 13. 1 and 4 to 6.